2021 has not had the best of starts, to say the least, and I thought that it would be helpful for me to process some of the last month in order to better make sense of the next month. So I thought maybe this would be a good thing for me to do. It's a form of reflection. At the same time, it will help clear the cobwebs of my brain, the space in my brain that is being taken up by news from the past month. If I were to perhaps clear it out, then I can think better for the next few weeks until more of these issues continue to increase and spread around. 2021 so far, I mean, the world seems like it's in a bit of a state of disarray. Just yesterday we had the Myanmar military coup, which seems like a big deal. Lots of disputes between countries, as always, but as of late it's been on my radar. So it's like in Ethiopia and Sudan, there's some border issues there, very violent it seems, or it seemed like it could be a really thorny problem over there. And then with China and India, for example, I don't know if for the past year or so, there has been an escalation. Well, past 2 years, I guess, there has been a rapid escalation in their war, in their kind of jockeying for control over Kashmir, which is in the north west of India. But recently there was another border clash by Sikkim. Sikkim is in northeast India. So there's Sikkim, and then there's Kashmir over there. Lots of border issues with China and India, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better with those two countries. China has had lots of disputes over the past month that have been escalating, especially in Hong Kong, China stuff. Everyone knows about that, and I think the UK is opening up pathways for citizenship for Hong Kong citizens. There is China and Taiwan. China seems to have they're having a stronger line on Taiwan. I mean, it's been happening for several decades now, but it seems like it's moving in a much more definitive direction. In other sorts of states of disarray, there's Russia, I guess, also Russia with the Navalny protests. This journalist, I think, Navalny, he made this documentary, put it up on YouTube. I think it has right now about 100 million views, and it exposes the corruption of Putin and his administration. I think it's called Putin's Palace. But in the documentary, if you see it, there was I think it's at the beginning of the documentary, it says something like, on the 23rd of January, we will have go out to the streets to protest. Because what happened was Navalny, the journalist who was at the forefront of this documentary, got arrested. So I think for the past 2 weeks now, or I guess week and a half or so, there has been a lot of these protests in Russia, thousands and thousands of people arrested all over Russia. So lots of political instability over there. Political instability, let's see, Myanmar, Russia. Malaysia has had lots of political instability as well, and I think recently they just declared a state of emergency. And it seems tied somewhat to their political turmoils over the past year or two. I mean, it's hard to really to get all of what's been going on around the world, but it seems like, again, lots of instability, lots of states of disarray. And then beyond all of this stuff, with all of this political stuff, we have the vaccines being slowly disseminated through different countries. Lots of vaccine wars going on of sorts, or people trying to, negotiate with different countries and different governments in order to acquire vaccines, and arguments about efficacies of certain vaccines. For the Philippines, for example, recently I read that we have approved the use of AstraZeneca, I think it's the Oxford vaccine, for emergency use in the Philippines. It was a recent article, maybe from a few days ago, AstraZeneca for emergency use in the Philippines. And at the same time, I also read a different article saying that a bunch of German scientists have said that They have found that there isn't actually enough information to say that AstraZeneca's vaccine would be safe for people over the age of 65. So there's like that double thing of, I just read in the news that we have approved it for emergency use, and I imagine emergency use is used for people who are most susceptible to the disease, and I imagine those are people who would be over 65. But at the same time, this German study saying that it's actually, they don't recommend it for people that old. It's not clear if it's safe. So all this stuff, like, if, for example, if I think about the Philippines, there is the sense that over the past few months we haven't had any increase in cases. So if you go out to the malls, if you go out on the streets, it doesn't seem like people are as worried as they used to be. But I think it's a bit misleading, because if you look at the day-to-day cases, there, for the past, I would say 6 months, even maybe more than 6 months, there hasn't really been an increase in testing. So in a sense, we've already reached the cap of our possible number of cases we can have every day. Like, in other countries, for example, in somewhere like Malaysia, it's been kind of increasing in this direction. Now it's like around, 5,000 cases a day. When it used to be very, not very, very low in the single or double digits not too long ago. And so here, because we stopped increasing the number of tests that we do in the country, I think it hovers around 25,000 every day. It's impossible for the number of cases to increase unless infectivity increases. But infectivity has a cap to, depending on the strain, it has kind of a cap to how infective it can be generally. And also, I don't know, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I imagine a lot of the tests that are being done every day, many of them, compared to how it was at the beginning of the pandemic, are for people, or like work-related tests. So they're brought up by companies, and then they test their workers, even if they don't necessarily need to. It's more of just for safety. But anyway, there are all sorts of different things going on. So I think it misleadingly seems that things have been getting better here, but the reality is it's impossible for it to get worse on paper, because there's like a cap. There's a cap to the cases we have every day, because of the maximum number of tests that we haven't really continued to increase. So there's that. Oh yeah, how could I forget? American elections, U.S. elections. Finally, well, I guess there was the so-called Capitol riots, where many people who were supportive of Donald Trump were storming the Capitol and went into the building and all this stuff. That was a big deal. It feels strange, because as I say it feels so long ago, but really it was just this month, or the past month, I mean, less than 30 days ago. This was going on up to the proper inauguration of the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden. And ever since then, it's been kind of quiet. Usually for the past, I'd say, 4 years of Trump in office, the American media news cycle has been very loud. No matter where you are in the world, it's undeniable. It's like impossible to escape the American news cycle. But since Biden became president, I don't think I've seen much going on in the U.S. apart from like tech news, like how Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg are going at it because of I think Apple has they're kind of introducing an iOS 14, this thing where every user, for every app, you have to opt in to sharing your data, and Facebook got really mad about it because it will most likely hit their revenue streams if people don't opt into sharing their data with Facebook, because a lot of the ways in which Facebook makes money is how they don't necessarily sell your data. They share your data with all sorts of different advertising organizations and all this stuff, so that they can better show you what they think you'll be more likely to want to buy or click on. So it's a big part of their revenue stream. So they're being directly hit. The argument of Mark Zuckerberg is that it supposedly hurts small businesses because they rely on the immense amount of shared data to better advertise their own products. And he said something like it may in the direction where certain apps will just make it subscription based because they don't have, like, they're going to lose a revenue stream from the sharing of your data, and so they may just become subscription based, and so at the end of the day it hurts the users. Or I think one of the other arguments I read was that it's actually a secret ploy by Apple, because if it does become the case that they lose a revenue stream from the ads and then they're forced to make their application subscription based, Apple gets a cut from that, from every purchase. But there are all sorts of different angles for it. In one sense, I think it, obviously there's a benefit to it. Makes sense why I would want to have more awareness, more consciousness about whether or not I want to share my data, and so the opting in makes some sort of sense. But it's a big tech thing now. And yeah, those are the last month has been that, and then there has been, I'm a big fan of music, lots of music deaths. At the beginning of the month they announced, the family of MF Doom announced that he passed away in October, but we only found out the beginning of the month. And MF Doom was, for me personally, like, one of those artists that when I was beginning to get into music or learning more about different kinds of music, it's impossible not to, especially if you're interested in hip-hop, it's impossible not to stumble on the Mad Villain album, Mad Villainy, with MF Doom and Madlib, and hearing the ways in which they just, it's hard to describe. They're so creative and so fun, and the way that MF Doom kind of tethers his words together into these incredible rhymes. It's amazing, and it really changed the way I thought about hip hop, because I didn't really listen to that much hip hop before. But when I heard Mad Villainy, it really was an aha moment for me, definitely. And then a few days ago, SOPHIE passed away. SOPHIE, the experimental producer, artist, singer-songwriter. And I was surprisingly more affected than I thought I would be from the passing of someone I don't know. I was quite affected by it. SOPHIE, for those who are not familiar, is perhaps, in the experimental music scene, experimental pop scene, I would go on to say while she was alive, she was the most exciting artist in the field. She was the one who was most pushing the genre, or the vocabulary of what was allowed to be played with. It's kind of this thing where SOPHIE experimented a lot with textures, with sounds. She would create certain sounds that were not tied to real life musical instruments, or not tied to real life objects, that they felt so otherworldly, and she would create them individually and then manipulate them in ways that, when used to build into a song, would consistently amaze. And the problem, and the biggest tragedy with SOPHIE's passing, is that she was so young. She only really properly released one album, two technically. One was a compilation album of singles, another one was her debut album. And I would say she was the most exciting figure in the entire experimental pop music scene. And especially over the past 2 years, there's been this resurgence. There's been they're not the resurgence, but there's been this big discussion around this idea of hyperpop, with the 100x and everything. There's this new genre called hyperpop, and has only really been getting national attention or international attention in the past year or so. And the architect of hyperpop was SOPHIE, as well as A.G. Cook, for the most part. So SOPHIE was a big part of this new movement of sound that was only in the past year or so getting the recognition of influence that it deserved. And so she had such an exciting career. So she was so special and so creative, and it really is like a loss to the world of music to lose someone at the height, at their, the thing is, if you listen to her albums, you'd think that it's just the beginning. There's a sense that soon, she was at the forefront of taking music to another level, and this was just the beginning. But now she's gone, and it is really just a huge loss to the music world and music community. A world of sound gone from this planet forever, but she's with the moon now, I guess. And yeah, I guess that's January. That's January 2021.